Good day, viewers. Welcome to Duke TV on our program World Politics. On World Politics today, we're going to be looking at issues across the globe, especially as it affects humanity and by extension Nigeria. We cannot close our eyes to what is happening in the Middle East between the Israelis and the Palestinians, extending to Iran, America, and their allies. Whatever involves human destruction, lives and property, that is not what should be encouraged. And all sane humans must come together and try to find solutions to such challenges. And today, to help us handle this matter, we have brought a personality that is most competent, most qualified to handle this subject for us. And I'm talking of Dr. TIMEHIN Pls, who holds a PhD in foreign languages and Middle Eastern literature. Ladies and gentlemen, join me to welcome Dr. TIMEHIN. Doc, welcome to Duke TV.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm glad to have you here.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So, Doc, I'm sure you heard me when I was doing the preamble.
Yeah.
I'm sure you are very familiar with the crisis in the Middle East. But the way it is now, unlike in the past, it's getting out of hand. What is your analysis of the situation? And can you confidently say this thing is just starting now, or has it dated back from ancient history?
Well, thank you very much. The crisis in the Middle East has a very long history, and that's because the Middle East is a meeting point of a lot of different kinds of civilizations. You have it as the cradle of the Jewish civilization, the Christian civilization, the Islamic civilization. And apart from that, there were ancient civilizations that predated these three other civilizations. So naturally, there should be a kind of difference in the way we perceive things. But the current crisis, particularly the Israel-Palestinian crisis and its extensions, because what actually happened recently, the most recent one, the one between Iran and Israel, is not unconnected with the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. So it has always been there. So, but the Israeli-Palestinian crisis is a very, if we must understand what is going on now, if we must understand the World War III rhetorics, we should understand the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Unfortunately, people have given so many uninformed analyses. There are people who think it's a religious conflict. There are those who feel it's something between Christians and Muslims. You know, in fact, I have had
or something racial.
Something that is racial. You know, in fact, I have had the opportunity of listening to some of our Christian brothers who felt it was a case of Palestinian Muslims and Israeli Christians, not knowing that the Palestinians were actually a mixture of Muslims and Christians, while the Israelis were primarily Jews. You know, but if we look into
Sorry, Doc, when you say Jews, does that mean they are not Christians?
They are not.
Okay.
They are not. They practice Judaism.
All right.
That is the religion of Moses.
All right.
Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So they are the Yahud, the Jews. They are not Christians. And there are two types of Jews. You have the Sephardic Jews. We call them Sephardim. Those Jews that dwelled in the Arab areas, in the Middle East and in the Far East. You know, when Nebuchadnezzar...
They are like nomadic.
Yes, when Nebuchadnezzar invaded Israel, he took them into captivity. Some were taken into the Eastern Hemisphere, some were taken into the Western Hemisphere. Those who were taken into the Eastern Hemisphere are the Sephardic Jews. The Ashkenazim Jews were the ones that were taken into the Western Hemisphere. That's why you have British Jews, French Jews, American Jews, Canadian
German
Jews, French Jews, and what have you. So those are the... So the problem has always been the problem of Ashkenazim Jews, because the Ashkenazim Jews were those who gave birth to the political ideology called Zionism. So it is possible you encounter an average Jew and you have no problem with him or her, because they are just like every other person, and very resourceful, very intelligent, very brilliant set of people. But the political ideology of Zionism is really the problem here. That's the culprit. That's the ideology of dominance. Ideology, it's a kind of apartheid, and that is the reason why, and that's why you see a lot of people reacting in recent times. In the past, they have had a free day, they have continued to oppress people. Nobody reacted. So we were all at the mercy of the media. But because of the social media, because of the development of the information technology, we have access to a lot of information now. We now know that there are people within Israel who are not Zionists. We now know that there are so many Jews out there in the Western world who do not subscribe to the ideology of hate called Zionism. So historically, when you talk about the crisis in the Middle East, people will tell you it started in 1948. I do not subscribe to that. There are those who will tell you it started in 1917. That is still manageable, it's fairly acceptable.
Close to the truth.
But in reality, I believe the whole idea began in 1804 when Father Lewis Wade, was the president of the London Society for the Conversion of Jews into Christianity. He was the one that started between 1804 and 1815, that started campaigning for the establishment of a homeland for the Jews. He actually wanted to convert them into Christianity, and he felt one way of winning the heart of the Jews is to show that you align with their cause, you pity their plight, you are empathetic towards them. So he started trying to win them, because that was what he wanted. He wanted them to become Christians, because the Jews, wherever you find them, they still cling to the Jewish tradition. They try to the best of their ability to keep the tradition alive, even if they are not strict, if they are not traditional Jews, but they know that their identity is Jewish and they want to stick to it.
That.
Yes, to maintain that. So that continued. Then in 1840, the Jewish Orientalist Solomon Monk visited Muhammad Ali Pasha in Egypt. Muhammad Ali Pasha was a Turkish ruler of Egypt at that time. He, as a first step towards establishing Jewish communities globally, he actually requested Muhammad Ali Pasha to give the Jews in Egypt, the Arab Jews or the Egyptian Jews, a separate community. He actually wanted them to have a whole town to themselves. What Muhammad Ali Pasha did not agree, but what he did was that he gave them exclusive educational system. Okay, you want curriculum based on your Jewish tradition, let's give that to you. You want policies that will take care of your interests, we'll give you that. It wasn't until 1897, during the first Jewish conference, the first Zionist conference held in France under the leadership of Theodor Herzl, that we started having problems, because that was the time the idea of expanding to the whole world came. They had a dream, and the dream was that the land of Palestine was the land of Canaan promised to their ancestors. And
known as Promised Land.
They called it the Promised Land. So they felt, I mean, you can't tell me God has promised your ancestors my land. Because don't forget that at that time, they said God promised their ancestors. There were people already living in the land of Canaan. In fact, Roger Garudi, in his book, The Issue of Political Zionism and Israel, it was a Jewish journalist, said the Canaanites had been living in the land of Palestine 3,500 years before Christ. So that was even before Abraham. So he argued that rather than seeing themselves as autochthonous group, a settling group that has stayed in an area for a long time, they are now claiming ownership. So, and that was what was deliberated upon in 1897 at the Zionist conference, and they came out of that meeting with a determination to seize or take over the land of Palestine. The Western powers knew who the Jews were, and they knew how resourceful, how versatile, and how crafty they were. So as a result, they also supported the notion, because in fact there was a time they toyed with the idea of settling them in Uganda, later in Ethiopia. Before they now, after the Zionist conference, it was concluded that that was the promised land, so let's settle them there. So this was what led to the Balfour Declaration of November 1917. Lord Balfour was the British Foreign Secretary for the Middle East at that time. So he was in charge of the Palestinian mandate, really representing the British government. The Balfour Declaration, every student of international politics knows that the Balfour Declaration had no mandatory force. It had no mandatory power. But because it was just a letter written by Lord Balfour to Lord Rothschild, who was the head of the of the Zionist community in England. And what was the content of the Balfour Declaration? His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment of a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment of a homeland for the Jews in Palestine without prejudice for the non-Jewish community currently occupying the territory. I mean, look at the aphorism, look at the way
Oh my God.
the original owners of the land, look at the way they were captured. The non-Jewish communities currently occupying the territory, that without prejudice to them. So, but Theodor Herzl and Ben Gurion, the early leaders, knew what they wanted. And when the Balfour Declaration was made, there were reactions among so many philosophers, thinkers, political pundits all over the world. In fact, Arthur Koestler described that document. He said, the Balfour Declaration is a document in which one nation promised to another nation the country of a third nation. He said,
Oh my God.
He said, this document, this declaration is one document in which a country promised to another nation the land of a third nation. So the British government was promising the Jewish community the land of Palestine, which was never theirs.
So offering what they don't have.
What they don't have. So that was in 1917. And so it was a plan, it was a preconceived plan. All of the Western powers, the great powers at that time, knew what they wanted. They knew that they were not going to be fair to the Palestinians. They knew it. Because in the handing over note given by Lord Balfour to Lord Curzon, who succeeded him as the British Foreign Secretary in the Middle East, in that document he wrote that the four great powers are committed to Zionism. And Zionism, be it right or wrong, good or bad, is deep-rooted in age-long traditions of far profounder import than the wishes and aspirations of the Arabs currently living in the territory. And that is the place where 93% of the people were Arabs. As at that time, 93% of the people were Arabs. Well, the Palestinians too had their fault.
Okay.
They had their fault. What actually aided the domination of Palestine was the coming into power of Adolf Hitler in Germany, because he decided to eliminate all of the Jews. So the Western power started smuggling Jewish immigrants out of Germany into Palestine. The fault of the Palestinians was because there were so many scholars around the world. Bashiruddin Mahmoud Ahmad, for example, wrote a booklet which he told the Palestinians, don't sell your land to them. But the typical Omonile mentality, they saw it as an opportunity. The British government started patronizing, and they were selling so many areas. And they didn't know that those areas were to be used to house the Jewish immigrants. Even as early as 1920, as early as...
But hold on, Doc. Are you saying they actually sold the land to them?
They sold some of the lands
to the Jews?
To the Jews.
All right.
Because they were still in the majority.
Because some people will be talking about ownership.
No.
Once something is sold.
No, it's,
then
you say...
the issue of ownership becomes...
Okay, now we're in Lagos now.
Okay.
As Lagosians, we own Lagos. Right. If we now accommodate you and sell land to you, you shouldn't come and start arguing where the land belongs to you. We want to live together cheek by the jowl. We want to live together, in harmony. Okay? You want to stay here,
accommodate you.
But knowing the Jews for what they are, the Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Ahmad said, know the Jewish dominant instinct. Don't sell your land. But they went ahead. They sold. What they sold was less than 1/10 of these. So it's not
less
really...
than 10%.
So it's still insignificant.
Expansionism now came over.
But the policy of the foreign powers, France, Germany, France, UK, US and Russia were in support of that.
You call them the Allied forces.
So at that time, the United Nations was not existing. You had the League of Nations. It was after the Second World War, at the time of the Second World War, that you had United Nations. So at that time, you had top British politicians who also kicked against it. Lord Grey, for example, drew the attention of the British Parliament at the House of Lords to it in 1923. He told the people, he said, a Zionist homeland means a Zionist state in a place where 93% of the people are Arabs. He said,
not Jews.
Not Jews. He said, 93% of the people are Arabs, and you want to establish a Jewish homeland there. He said, that homeland, you are talking about a state. And that was exactly what happened. So they knew from the outset that they were going to seize the land. But the unfortunate thing is there is a lot of duplicity, a lot of hypocrisy in the whole thing. It was President Woodrow Wilson of America that gave us the two principles of international relations. One, the right of peoples to self-determination. Two, the inadmissibility of the use of force in the acquisition of territories. Which of these have not been violated by Israel? Now, the United Nations has consistently denied Palestine the right of statehood, the rights of people to self-determination. Don't the Palestinians, forget about what happened, even within the remaining small territory, as small as it is, don't they have a right to self-determination? The UN has not given them that. And they have consistently assisted Israel to turn that land into a living prison for the Palestinians, who are majorly Muslims and Christians. So the crisis had been there for a very long time. In fact, in the 60s, when in 1963, the Pope Boniface at that time issued a declaration that because of the centrality of Jerusalem to the Abrahamic faith tradition, to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, that Jerusalem should be declared as an independent state. And you know what the Zionists did? They started promoting the propaganda that the Pope was a Nazi agent. So public sentiment started turning against the Pope. And that was the reason why the Vatican issued the absolution decree, absolving the Jews of the blood of Christ. They now said it wasn't the Jews that killed Jesus, to pacify them. And whereas what Pope Boniface suggested was pragmatic enough, so let's have the state of Israel, have the state of Palestine. Then if Jerusalem is going to be a place of, if it's going to be in conflict, let it be independent, let it be under international mandate, overseen by the United Nations. Everybody will have access to it. You will not claim it exclusively. You know, so anything that would prevent the Jews from having absolute authority, they will kick against it, because they even drew a map, not on over the land of Palestine alone, a map extending to Saudi Arabia. So what we are seeing is just the preamble. The intention was to dominate the entire Middle East. And that's so those who saw beyond what the media reports are those who have actually reacted like Iran. Iran, well, because of religious reason, may empathize with Palestine, because they had also suffered under the Shah of Iran, when the Shah was an American stooge. So they had also, because they had experienced it, but they could see beyond that the Israeli, and these are not conspiracy theories, these are not suspicions, because there are documents, there are declarations consistently made by Israeli leaders. Like Ben-Gurion said, for now, we will accept him start, but our vision is Judean start. So
what does that mean?
Yeah, him start, that is a homeland.
Oh, okay.
But our interest is a Jewish state. So they knew from such declarations, they knew that these people had a greater plan. So it's not just a matter of accommodating them within a place. It is a matter of planning to take over the entire region. And that's why I know that the response of the Arab League had been poor. The response of the Muslim World League had been very, very poor, because all of them were playing politics. They have not actually insisted.
Doc, couldn't that be connected with the experience of the past? You know, there was a time Egypt attempted to confront Israel, in sympathy with Palestine, and you know what the consequences were?
Egypt attempted it, and they would have succeeded if US, France, and Britain had not supported Israel. They had a larger military, and that's the reason the Americans continued to build. Even this year, they are supporting the Israeli military with $3.8 billion.
That's a huge.
So consistently, they have consistently invested into Israeli military, because they wanted Israel to be the strongest power in the Middle East. And that was the reason they fought Saddam Hussein.
Claiming he had
weapons which he never had. Because during the Iran-Iraq war, Iraq was their ally. They had equipped Iraq. They had spent so much on Iraq, and they felt this guy had been armed to the tooth. He will be a threat to Israel in that area. So they didn't want that. So they needed an excuse to cut him to size, and that was what they did. That was what they did. So the Operation Desert Storm was just a facade. In August 2nd, 1991, when it started, by July 31st, they had informed King Sabah of Kuwait to leave, because they knew that Saddam Hussein was going to attack Kuwait. It was not because of their intelligence. It was because he told them, he submitted the plan, and that was the reason why he felt backstabbed. You know, he felt betrayed, because they knew everything.
That was the Kuwaiti leader?
No, Saddam Hussein.
Right?
He was mad, because everything, he carried them along, and they gave him their blessings, only to turn around and summon allied forces to fight him. And knowing he was a stubborn type, they had, and they succeeded in bringing him down. So it's a very complex scenario. Now, the problem in Gaza, Israel has consistently annexed Palestinian territories. Even Gaza, which was under the Israeli, which was under the Palestinians, you know what the journalists call it, the largest open prison in the world. They had no freedom. The Hamas attacked. It is very attractive to say the Hamas caused it. They shouldn't have attacked. They shouldn't have attacked Israel. Fine, but don't forget something. There is a connection between frustration and aggression. When you are frustrated to a point, even though
you're not even being controlled of
you become something else. So it was as a result of the persistent cooperation. What most people did not know was that in year 2000, it was discovered that off Gaza Strip, there is massive oil deposit, that place. So it was, the motivation was economic. It was bigger, larger, and more vast than the deposits you had in Israel.
Okay.
And the Palestinians entered into an agreement with the British concession, that the British concession was to rig and explore the oil for them. Israel refused. And they now said they could only do that on the condition that they will sell the crude to Israel. Not only that, they will not buy at the current international value. It will be far, far lower than that. Not only that, they were not going to pay they are not going to pay in currency, they were going to pay in services. Something that did not belong, or that does not belong to them. So, what's the point of being in control of resources? I mean, having resources on your land and you have no control over it. So the Palestinians were mad at that. And because of that, that slowed down the exploration on Gaza Strip offshore. So the most recent attempt at reviving the concession was in 2022. And when the Hamas had already won election, they were legitimate rulers of Gaza.
Was it like a political party?
Yes, no, it was. So they had already won election. They were ruling Gaza. So when you come into power, you start thinking of how to better the lot of your people. You start looking for resources. Then you have your natural resources given to you by God. So they reopened discussion with British concession.
But Doc, anybody hearing Hamas across the globe, the impression is terrorism.
That's the media. One man's terrorist, that's what Angel Cook said. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. It depends on who is making the narrative. Who is making the narrative. The government will say they are terrorists. The people will say we are fighting for our rights. So this is the thing. It is,
but that the attack on Israel, the mass attack on Israel.
Yes.
It also affected innocent children and civilians. How do we reconcile this?
You see, there was an attack. The number of people killed. The number of people killed is known. The Hamas has its own enclave. The Israeli targets were not at the they were not targeting the stronghold or the headquarters of the Hamas. They were targeting civilian the civilian quarters. They was targeting hospitals, targeting schools, targeting civilian living quarters. If the attack had been the military headquarters of the Hamas or the artilleries and what have you, it is understood. That will not be. That
will be another issue.
Yes, and nobody's going to call it genocide. But they already need, Hamas just played into their hands. They already needed an excuse to wipe out, and that's
the reaction.
The president deliberately he said it that no, he was not going to rest until
that they want to be looking at Gaza straight from
Tel Aviv. So this is the problem. So it was already in the plan, and because prior to that time, the attack was in October. In May 2023, the president had brought a map of New Israel to the United Nations. It was shown.
You mean Netanyahu?
Yes, Netanyahu. Everybody knew he already had charges of war crimes against him. But he won the election, fine, and he was ruling. He had already brought to the United Nations a map of New Israel. They call it the Greater Israel. One of the territories was already Gaza. So you knew there was a plan to annex the whole of Gaza. In fact, the whole of Jerusalem, the whole of Palestine. That was in the plan, extending to Lebanon and Syria. So that was the dream, that was the vision. So it is not something, they just needed a catalyst, and they saw that catalyst in the attack of the Hamas.
To unleash.
Now, everybody started shouting. You see people, for the first time in the history of this crisis or of this conflict, people reacted from different corners of the world. Everybody started condemning it. You see Jewish rabbis coming out to condemn it. Now, this is not what Judaism stands for. But because Israel has always been backed by the American government and most of the Western countries.
Doug, let's come to recent event now, because we can't.
Yes, we can't exhaust
this.
Yes.
Even in there is this Israeli attack
on the embassy of Iran in Damascus.
In Damascus, Syria.
Yeah.
And from what we've gathered, there was no condemnation from the United States.
No
condemnation from the United Nations. And looking at that, after a week or two, we saw what happened between Iran and Iran attacking Israel. What do you make out of this?
Well, you say that confirms.
Sorry, wouldn't that also be considered to be disproportionate? The attack on the embassy, just probably a building or an area. And then 300 drones against.
But you have not. At the same time, Israel has also retaliated. You heard
how? What we learned is that he's been told to have a restraint.
And because Israel had also. That's why Israel is claiming that only one 7-year-old girl was touched. That's a lie. Anyway, everybody knows that was a lie, because they have spent $1 billion in shooting down the Iranian ballistic missiles. But none of them could shoot down the 7 hypersonic missiles fired by Iran, because none of the Western powers has that technology. It's only Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran. Only 4 nations in the world.
But couldn't they, destroy it?
They could not. They could not, because they don't have the technology to do. In fact, only till date, only Russia has the technology to shoot down the hypersonic missiles.
Not even the Americans?
Not even the Americans. Now,
so would that be the reason for call for restraint from America?
Because they know it will overstretch their budgets. They have spent, okay, Israel alone spent within a month, spent to shoot down the ballistic missiles. But the ballistic, Iran knew that the missiles would not reach there because that was meant to deplete the resources of Israel, so that they will continue to waste their rockets to shoot down those missiles, while the hypersonic things will go. The 7 hypersonic missiles hit the targets because they couldn't stop those ones. So they knew. Now, who is the winner? Israel spent $1 billion. Iran spent $35 million. So who is the winner? So if it continues, the economic burden will be too much. And all of this, Israel America has restrained itself, not because it's comfortable with it, but because, one, election is coming. Election is coming. People are already dissatisfied with the role they played in Gaza, and which they are still playing. People are already dissatisfied with them. Then the LGBT issue is also there, haunting them. So public sentiment is, being fanned.
In Europe, in America,
exactly.
A lot of people.
So people
even those who make arguments in favor of Israel in the American Parliament, people are targeting.
That is it. So they are, probably restructuring how they're going to go about it, deconstructing the whole scenario and trying to. So what I think is we should take away from all this, mankind is moving towards another global war. And we should not be. We should not be. I don't think humanity will survive another global war. So they should resort to diplomacy. And it is very easy to do that if you just adopt absolute justice as a principle. Okay? We cannot say that Israel should leave Palestine. You can, but you can.
Where are they going?
Yeah, but they can't go anywhere. They have already built a nation there. But you can ask them to go back to the 1967 boundaries, then approve the establishment of the Palestinian nation with no restriction.
Access to open waters.
Let everybody who is interested in that place go there and invest, because the land is rich in resources. They can build a nation there.
Dubai can be made out of the place.
That is it. But when you preach democracy and in reality you practice duplicity, that is what the Western powers are doing. That is what the United Nations is doing. And you start so at the end of the day you say, how united are the nations? How united are these nations? So I think it is better. It's not going to help anybody if everything degenerates into another global war. Now, about 6 nations already have the VX nav gas. The VX nav gas, only 4 tons of it will destroy the whole world.
Oh my God.
US, Russia, China, North Korea, all of them already have it. So what are we talking about? We want peace. We want to live in harmony. We continue building weapons of mass destruction. And now the newly developed hypersonic missiles are there. That one is also there. And America will soon develop the technology. Other nations will attempt to do it too. So at the end of the day, we have built enough to destroy the whole world. So because every time they talk about nuclear disarmament, it's just petty political game. Nuclear disarmament, what do? They just disarm, they destroy the outdated weapons and replace them with more sophisticated ones. Unless, and when you talk about the New World Order narrative, people will say that's a discussion for another day.
Yes, I was even going to say that.
There's no way we can when you discuss the New World Order narrative, people will say that's conspiracy theory. But already we are seeing it. Already you had representative of that narrative saying that more than 3 billion people have to die. Because we are not talking about humanity now, we are talking about post-humanity, a post-human world which is ruled by machines anyway. So look at the social implication, look at the moral implication of such. So may that day never come. So I think humanity needs to, I mean, we are not doing enough here. We have our own problems in Nigeria anyway. Otherwise, every nation should really come out and talk to their to their rulers. Let's be human. Let's stop this madness. Nobody should support any nation that is pushing us towards global war. I think that is, it's as a matter of urgency. That's what it should.
Thank you very much, Dr. Timehin. We will agree that this is a first leg of this discussion.
Yeah.
There will definitely be a second leg. And probably when we bring somebody who probably didn't see this picture the way you do, that will be on the opposite side. So very soon, in the next 1 or 2, that will happen. And so we'll rest the matter for today. I thank you so much for all you have enlightened us with. But one thing I want us to emphasize is that this is not about hating Israel
at all
as a people. It's about policy.
Yeah.
Even in Israel, I am aware a lot of their citizens are not in favor of what is happening.
Yeah.
They have come out in thousands to demonstrate their displeasure.
It's just a political ideology. It's not.
So we, and this religious aspect of it, we must, discourage it, because it's not about religion
at all. It has nothing to do.
On the part of Israel, we have Muslims.
It's about human rights. It's about.
Doc, am I right to say we have Muslims on the Israeli side?
Yes, we have.
We have Muslims among them. We have on this side. We have some that do not belong to any of these religions at all. So it's about humanity.
Yeah.
And that's the way we should see it. The conclusion I'm drawing is that war will not favor anybody. And then we should do everything to avoid war, not even a third world war for that matter. God bless you, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you.
Hope to have you again very soon. Thank you very much.